Joining me now is TWU Assistant National Secretary Nick McIntosh. Nick, good morning to you. How disruptive do you expect today's strikes to be?
Oh, good morning, Peter. Look, there's no doubt they're going to be disruptive to the general public. And the first thing I want to say to the general public on behalf of Jetstar workers is to convey their apologies about the delays and disruptions they will face. It's certainly not the intent of our workforce to maximise disruption. That's why we didn't take any strike action over Christmas and the New Year period. And of course, when bushfires ravaged the country in January, the workers called a moratorium until Jetstar came back to the negotiating table. But unfortunately, workers have been forced into this position because of the way Jetstar have conducted themselves. Jetstar came back to the negotiating table kicking and screaming in late January. We had one meeting. We had a second meeting a week later where they literally walked into the room, said, we're rejecting all your key claims about job security. We're going to introduce our own claims which cut your existing conditions. They put a hard copy document on the table labelled final offer, said there's no further point in continuing negotiations. And by the way, if you don't accept this deal, it's take it or leave it. If you don't accept it, we won't back pay you 3% that you're owed from March 2019. So unfortunately, workers don't want to be doing this. They'd rather be at the negotiating table with Jetstar, but Jetstar, through their bully boy tactics, through their threats and coercion, have forced the hand of workers today.
But Nick, Jetstar says that workers will be getting a 3% increase plus 12 months worth of back pay. So why is that unreasonable?
Well, firstly, that's untrue. What Jetstar has said is if workers reject the current deal, and I'll come to that in a second, they won't be back paid to March 2019. Now, let's remember that this workforce did the difficult but responsible thing when this company was in trouble a few years ago and took an 18-month wage freeze. What Jetstar are now saying to this same workforce that bailed them out when they were in trouble, is even though the Qantas are now making $1.3 billion in profit and Jetstar's revenues are $4 billion, that if they don't accept the current deal on the table, a deal that does nothing to address the chronic underemployment in this workforce, a deal that does nothing to address the safety issues in this workforce, then that 3% backdated to March 2019 will be taken off the table. So, Peter, what that means is if workers exercise their rights and vote no to this deal, they will be experiencing a 2.5-year wage freeze over the last 6 or so years. That is not good enough for a company like this.
Well, but the wage increase is 3%, right? Which is almost double inflation at the moment, which is hovering at about 1.7 to 2%. So that seems to be quite an increase for workers.
Well, as I said, the big issue is that wage back pay is actually off the table if workers vote no. But I would say, I'll quickly say this about wages. These are workers guaranteed, many of which only guaranteed 20 hours a week. Their pay is a little over $20 an hour. That means these workers are getting a little over $400 an hour. 3% of not much is not much. But to be honest with you, Peter, this really isn't about wages. Jetstar are trying to pivot and say it's all about wages. 3% is a great deal. I've gone through the fact that, of course, this workforce took an 18-month wage freeze. But this is actually about a chronic problem with the aviation industry, and that is underemployment. And unfortunately, it's an acute problem at Jetstar. Many workers are only guaranteed 20 hours a week. We released a survey of hundreds of Jetstar workers yesterday, 80% of which said they struggle to pay their bills. 45% of those have had to, in fact, contact their financial institution because they've been unable to repay loans. And 90% of the workforce simply want more hours. You cannot survive on 20 hours a week at a little over $20 an hour, so $400 a week, a little over that. You can't survive on that. We all know that. You can't repay bills. And we've had some results come back from this survey where one worker told us he'd had to work 340 days in the year, on average 30 hours a week, on average 6 days a week, and he still couldn't provide properly for his family. He was having marital problems because he was constantly working rosters that were all over the shop and he wasn't seeing his kids. This is what this dispute is about. Don't let Jetstar fool anybody that this is about simply about wages. It is about underemployment. It is about the outsourcing of good Australian jobs. These workers simply want the chance to work more hours.
All right, Nick McIntosh, appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Peter.